On October 21, 2016, Twitter stopped loading. Netflix became unreachable. PayPal, Amazon, Tumblr, and dozens of other services began disappearing from millions of users. It looked like an attack on the internet itself. But the trail did not begin inside a government bunker. It began in Minecraft. Not inside the game exactly, around it. Because by 2016, Minecraft was no longer just a game where people built castles and fought monsters. Some privately operated servers had become real businesses. The biggest attracted thousands of players, sold premium ranks and digital advantages, and generated serious money. But there was a problem. A player whose favorite server went offline could switch to another one in seconds. Therefore, taking a rival server offline was not just sabotage, it was customer acquisition. The weapon was a distributed denial of service attack, or DDoS. Instead of breaking into a server, an attacker overwhelmed it with so much traffic that real players could no longer connect. Simple idea, complicated consequences. And in this strange underground economy, attacks and protection were becoming two sides of the same business. Paras Jha understood that world unusually well. He had grown up around Minecraft servers and learned how to attack them, defend them, and watch players move when one became unreliable. While studying at Rutgers University, he also launched repeated DDoS attacks against the university's network, sometimes timing them for moments when disruption would hurt most. But Paras did not only want to knock systems down. He and his friend Josiah wanted to build a company that protected them. They called it ProTrav Solutions. The plan sounded legitimate. Sell DDoS protection to Minecraft server operators who could not afford to go offline. But customers rarely changed protection providers when everything was working. They changed when their existing protection failed. That created an ugly business problem. ProTrav needed attacks in the market to prove that ProTrav was necessary. And the young men who wanted to sell the shield already knew how to build the sword. Josiah had experience assembling networks of infected devices. Paras could write code. Later, Dalton joined them and helped expand what their creation could infect. Together, they started building something far larger than the usual rented attack network. They called it Mirai. A name means future in Japanese. That would become disturbingly appropriate. Mirai did not mainly infect laptops or corporate servers. It searched the internet for ordinary connected devices, security cameras, home routers, and digital video recorders. Devices people installed, plugged in, and forgot. Many still used factory-set usernames and passwords. Others exposed remote access services directly to the internet. Their owners might never know they'd been compromised because the camera still recorded and the routers still connected. But quietly, each device had joined an army. One camera could not overwhelm a serious website, neither could one router. But tens of thousands acting together could produce a wall of traffic no normal server could absorb. And Mirai did not wait for its creators to recruit every device manually. It scanned continuously. It found vulnerable machines. It logged in. Then those machines began searching for more. The army built itself. This is where one simple decision by manufacturers could have changed the story. Every device should have arrived with a unique password or forced the owner to create one before going online. But many did not. Therefore, the same credentials worked again and again across thousands of devices owned by people who had never heard of Mirai. The botnet grew fast, too fast. At its peak, the original Mirai network controlled hundreds of thousands of devices. Its creators could rent out portions of that power, attack gaming targets, and overwhelm rivals with traffic on a scale the old Minecraft feuds had never required. But power attracts attention. In September 2016, the cybersecurity website KrebsOnSecurity was hit by an enormous attack measuring roughly 620 gigabits per second.
It was one of the largest attacks publicly recorded at the time. The site belonged to Brian Krebs, a journalist who investigated cybercriminals. Mirai had not merely attacked another gaming server. It had attacked the person most likely to investigate who was behind it. KrebsOnSecurity was forced offline, but the attack created the opposite result from the one its operators needed. Krebs started digging. At almost the same time, the French hosting company OVH was struck by attacks that pushed beyond 1 terabit per second. Now, security companies, infrastructure providers, journalists, and the FBI were all looking at the same new weapon. The creators had a problem. Mirai was too visible to keep using, and if investigators found the control infrastructure, they might trace it back to the people running it. So Paras, using the online name Anna Senpai, made a decision that appeared to offer an escape. He published Mirai's source code on a hacking forum. The logic was simple. If hundreds of people had the code, Mirai would no longer point to one group. Every new copy would create more noise. Attribution would become harder. The original creators could step away. But the move that was supposed to protect them transformed Mirai from a private weapon into a public blueprint. They had released the Army's DNA.
And less than a month later, the Internet felt the consequence. On October 21, a different group used a Mirai-based botnet in attacks aimed at taking the Sony PlayStation network offline. But the traffic hit Dyn, a company that provided a critical Internet service called DNS. DNS is the system that helps your device translate a name, such as a website address, into a numerical location it needs to reach. Dyn was not Twitter. It was not Netflix. It was not PayPal. But those services depended on Dyn to help users find them. Therefore, when Dyn struggled, websites that had not been hacked suddenly appeared to vanish. Twitter would not load. Netflix failed. Amazon, PayPal, and Tumblr and many others became unavailable or unreliable for hours. The attackers had aimed at a gaming platform, but the blast passed through a piece of shared infrastructure. That is how a fight born in online gaming became an internet-wide disruption. And here is the detail that matters. The 3 original Mirai creators were not the people later identified as carrying out the Dyn attack. They had done something more indirect. They built the tool. They proved its power. Then they released the code that allowed someone else to adapt it. That distinction keeps the story truthful, but it does not make the consequences smaller. Once source code is public, there is no recall button. You cannot ask every stranger to delete it. You cannot patch the Internet back to the moment before publication. Mirai variants began multiplying. Different groups modified the code, added new ways to infect devices, and competed for the same vulnerable machines. The creators had tried to disappear into the crowd. Instead, they created the crowd. Meanwhile, investigators were closing in. The aliases, business relationships, attacks on Minecraft servers, Proctref, Rutgers, and the technical fingerprints around Mirai formed a trail. Paras Jha, Josiah White, and Dalton eventually pleaded guilty to operating the botnet. The outcome was unusual. Because they cooperated extensively with the FBI and helped with other cybercrime investigations, each received 5 years of probation, 2,500 hours of community service, and restitution, rather than a long prison sentence. Paras also received a separate sentence for the Rutgers attacks and was ordered to pay millions in restitution. But the legal case did not end Mirai. Its descendants continued infecting poorly secured devices years later. The original servers could be seized. The original operators could be identified. The weakness that made Mirai possible was still everywhere. Cheap devices, default credentials, exposed services, owners who had no idea their camera or router was participating in an attack. That is the real lesson hidden inside this story.
Mirai was not powerful because one device was advanced. It was powerful because hundreds of thousands of ordinary devices were neglected in exactly the same way. A unique password here, a forced setup screen there, an update from a manufacturer or an internet provider blocking obviously malicious traffic could have broken parts of the chain. But no single person could see the whole chain. The camera owner saw a camera, the Minecraft player saw a game, the server operator saw a competitor, the developers saw a business opportunity, and 3 young men saw an army waiting to be assembled. They built Mirai to win a small war around Minecraft, but the weapon grew beyond the game, beyond its creators, and eventually beyond the targets anyone had intended. They did not personally press the button that made major parts of the internet disappear. They did something harder to undo. They published the button.